Good afternoon, my name is Nikolay Erofeev, and I'm going to talk about Igor Vinogradsky, who is one of the authors of the building where we are today. Vinogradsky was born in Moscow in 1925. He graduated from Marhi in 1951. Then he entered the Institute for Designing Moscow, and it later became Mos Design Institute 3, and he started working under the leadership of Vilensky, Professor Vilensky. At that time, Institute was dealing with recreation areas, for example, VDNH Park, Gorky Park, and Luzhniki. So this is an American exhibition that took place in Moscow that demonstrated different achievements of industry of the United States. It took place in Sokolniki, and the Americans built this pavilion made of steel structures and glass. And Mark Unser Fuller was the designer, and so Khrushchev ordered to create a comparable building. So he involved Vilensky team. There was an architectural exposition at this exhibition, and here you can see one of the exhibits shown there. So this is what Vilensky did together with Vinogradsky. This is the main entrance to the exhibition. Before that, there was a small triumph arc and a fountain. After the huge and extravagant Stalin's fountain, it looks very simple. And you can see just water and lights, nothing much. And then a similar fountain would be designed by Vinogradsky here in Gorky Park that can still be seen today. Apart from these facilities, they designed 7 cafes, 5 round and 2 square and 2 rectangular. So this is a big cafe for 440 people, and it has a glass facade and flat roof. It was welcomed by the press at that time. This is a different cafe for 225 people. And here you can see that they used a lot of many technologies because it was a very important governmental commission. So you could use new constructive principles, new material, plastics and aluminum and many other materials. And this was one of the first buildings in the Soviet Union with completely glass facade. And there was only a little bit of space left there that was not covered by glass. And so it meant that you could use this cafe only in summertime, and that's why these cafes were summer cafes, and for winter period they were closed. So these cafes looked great at night because they have luminescent lamps that were new at that time, and they were moving in a circular direction, so you could see many beautiful pictures of these places. This is another cafe that has this oculus in the center and a swimming pool underneath. That's what it looks like. Unfortunately, we can't see them now. They were not. They did not survive. Apart from that, there was a complex for exhibitions that was completed in 1961, and we can compare it with this slide that showed different exhibits at the American exhibition. So again, they were using the local technologies. The frame was made in Novokuznetsk, and so it helped to cover a very big space, 15 meters wide, without using central supports. And then the glass was produced by the companies in Saratov. And since it was a very rational structure and the local plant produced it, it was very easy to assemble. They did all the installation just within 2 months. So you can see the view from the cafe over to Pavilion. So this pavilion was built specially for international exhibitions, because after the American exhibitions, they didn't want to experiment with international trends. So they invited everybody to exhibit here. It was a beautiful space, and they had, for example, a French exhibition and an English exhibition in here. And at the same time, Vilinsky and Vinogradsky workshop made some small architectural buildings using small architectural forms in Moscow. And just in the light of the previous report, it's very interesting to look at them because they were built as instrumental pieces, but if they were productive enough, then Moscow City administration decided to stick to it and reproduce it. For example, this Sokol Cafe was built as a unique piece, whereas this dress shop, hairdressers shops were built a lot, and so also these little park pavilions that you can see in the corner, unfortunately they did not survive. So there was a new authority that was called the main Mosgor Ispolkom catering services. So this was Moscow City Executive Committee headquarters, and they designed the activities to improve the food, and so they started using providing semi-ready products, and they said that you no longer have to use your kitchen. We can use the factories and workshops instead of kitchens. So it would be like ready-made food. And this changed the typology of cafe, because the kitchen areas and all the storage facilities were reduced, whereas the main room, the main space would be increased. And here you can see one of these leaders eating some sausages in one of such cafes. Another goal identified in that resolution to improve public catering was to increase the network of public catering spaces up to thousands of cities. And so it meant that they were going to build a lot of new cafes, both in Moscow and in different regions. And it's clear that it would be logical to make different cafes for different groups of visitors. But as one of the co-authors of Vinogradsky remembered, Georgy Astafyev, he said that the customers found it easier to provide reporting for just one large building. For example, this was the 7-story cafe Druzhba for 1,500 people that was planned to be built in the center at the crossroads between Petrovka Street and Kuznetsky Most. So one of the built facilities was a 2-story cafe club at Chistые Prudy. Was built in 1968, and so there was a cafe downstairs and a restaurant and dance hall on the upper floor. So you can see some structural innovations. They used reinforced concrete and wide span consoles. They used glazing, and just by looking at this building and the support columns, that we can see the flat roof and the glazing, we can see how important it was for Vinogradsky to grasp the ideas of Le Corbusier. And actually we know that Le Corbusier's portrait was hanging in his workshop. So this is the interior of the cafe. And you can see that they used a lot of wood for interior, and you can see these partitions that they use between the halls. Then 2 years later, actually this building, this cafe, the Seasons, was built using a similar design. And here we can see that the staircases were monolithic concrete structures. This is a wooden sculpture that is used for interior part from mosaic panels and bricks. So even though the typical reinforced concrete structures were used, but still some brick walls were added. And so this brick was lacquered and was painted, which was preserved during reconstruction. And the whole ceiling was made of wood. And just like at Чистые пруды, the staircase would lead you to the dancing space on the second floor, and there was a cafe on the other side. And also they had some wooden screens between the spaces. And in general, this interior was a little bit simpler in terms of finishing than the one at Чистые пруды, but it was quite good quality. Vinogradsky, in his article, said that he did his best in order to achieve the maximum quality of installation and construction works, but there were many faults, that there were some openings in the ceiling and the roof, and so water could leak inside. So it means that the quality of works was not as high as they wanted. This is the room of on the second floor, and mass media and press criticized it. Because it looked like a railway station. They were not ready for such a big open space, so they said, it had a very bad acoustics, lots of noise. And here, the way architects saw the visitors of their cafe, so you can recognize the columns here that we can see today. Another example was implemented at VDNH. So this is the industry square, and there's an ensemble that consists of 3 buildings, and Vinogradsky developed the master plan for VDNH reconstruction. So he offered to replace Stalin's building with modernist building. So this is Pavilion 57, which is a copy of the pavilion in Sokolniki, but it's a little bit more, it's a little bigger, and this became the largest exhibition space in the Soviet Union, and the pavilion number 20 for light industry exhibitions, and this low pavilion number 19 for the exhibition of mechanization of agriculture. So that's how these pavilions look like. They have different height and different span of glazing. So this is Pavilion 19, and you can see that they left this space for ventilation, just because the glass would become steamy, so they could use these pavilions in winter time as well. They unfortunately, I don't have a color picture of this, but according to memoirs, it looked very effective because it was painted with golden shades. And Vinogradov remembers that he would go to different factories, for example, Borg glass factory with cognac, and he asked the directors to provide him this glass with special coating. And even though they had some difficulties to get the materials, and I think it's very interesting aspect and an example of informal relations in architecture. So working with new materials let Vinogradsky travel a lot, and this is the list of his business trips. And he would go to different countries to buy some things, to approve some equipment. So in the 60s, he went to different countries. He went abroad very often, and so he implemented some Western-style projects. And apart from procurement, his workshop did some research work, and they received patents for different structures, for example, a high support structure. Then they became MOS Project 4, and they were responsible for leisure facilities like the clubs and sports studios. And it was related to that trend that people began to have more free time. They had 2 days for rest, and that's why those leisure facilities became very important. He started also building some healthcare facilities, some sanatoriums, and some rest houses. His institute had 500 staff members, and they built a lot of facilities, and I'll just show you 3 of them.
So one of the first projects of the first institute of cleaning and gardening appeared in the process of reconstruction of Vidnica, and it's 1958. So just after completion of the glazed pavilions, and in this structure, the authors wanted maximum just mask windows, and the central volume consists of this windowless parallel windows. The narrow slots of windows are only on the sides, and in certain angles, simply not seen geometric forms. So the pavilion very much remind the works, designs of Lenin Pavlov, like the museum in Gorky. And it's quite evident that Vinogradsky is really trying to obtain the most clean linear geometrical forms. And though, the windows located on facades, very small ones, there is a very complex system of enlightenment insulation through the roof and additional electric lighting. And here you see the interior, so you see small reservoirs in these small indoor courtyards. So it consists of 3 volumes, each having a small reservoir and a void above it. And again, we see certain parallels with Western designs. Another major works from 1970s, that's kind of public rest house Primorye, among many other sanatoriums or just holiday villages which they were designing. But again, here the idea is that from a certain angle you simply don't see glazed elements on facades, windows, and the building is sitting on a very fairly complex relief, so they create the whole system of terraces. And the system of terraces also includes the roof, or the horizontal buildings, connected buildings, open for walks. And again, that kind of Corbusier utilitarian roof was finally implemented in this project. And in 1970s, so yes, this is the internal courtyard. The space design is kind of large winter garden, slightly reminiscent of earlier Vinogradsky projects when he was designing Palace of Pioneers. Again, in 1970s, the institute is responsible contractor for designing of Olympic Games project, designing dozens of different sports facilities, sports venues. I just want to show the building of Olympic Press Center located not far from here on Zovsky Boulevard, with the idea of providing room for 3,000 Javanese covering the Olympics. And again, here we see quite massive plastic forms. But again, what's interesting to mention is that this huge building may be interpreted as another variation, as a house sitting on supporting structures, and the level where the main block of building is lifted up, coincides to the building of old warehouses sitting just next door. So here you see the elements of facade, and this is the interior, and it's also implemented very solidly, substantially, like the outside facade. And the chaotic elements, decorative elements, they used marble and other decorative colored elements. The ceiling consisted of kind of gold-colored bars, and here you see the decorative panel hanging in the room on the second floor, and the stairwell going to the entresol. And in the 70s, the institute was designing, buildings for health care purposes, and it was also involved in developing, designing, standard projects for hospitals and clinics. But Vinogradsky designed several major clinics, individual projects. Well, one of them is an ecological center of Moscow, consisting of 3 volumes, 2 horizontal buildings stretching 600 meters each, and 24-story tower. Like 2 previous buildings, it's also elevated, sitting on the support structures, so it's above ground level. And this huge complex is designed on the outskirts of Moscow, so it was also perceived as a kind of monument structure, showing the city when you enter it from the east. So this powerful tower containing the main clinics, so the balconies are moved forward, so the windows kind of are hiding in the bit, slightly remind of some kind of fortress. But Vinogradsky interpreted it's a very kind of stern, linear, and very modern. But it turned out to be quite a paradoxical venue, because it's a hospital, but being very expressive features architecturally, and also playing very important role of landmark for the whole big district of Moscow. This is the interior and the courtyard. Very strange decorations, because the floors are decorated by huge panels performed by Lithuanian artists who did the big panel for the Olympics building. I think that the interior might be suiting anything but not the hospital. And in conclusion, I want to say, I could make this presentation without assistance of the daughter of architect Elena Vinogradsky, who gave me the access to archive of her father and the list of his author's work, in list 46 projects, not counting numerous competitions. And this is a great newly explored material which I'm going to publicize. Thank you.
We have seen here a very dramatic change of aesthetic mood of one person, or his collective. Are you sure that this is changing the mind of Mr. Vinogradsky himself, or is it due to new members in his collective, younger architects coming from school after years?
May I answer in English? May I answer in Russian, if I may? Well, I spoke to the colleagues, with the colleagues of Igor Vinogradsky, and he said this direct influence on this project was very strong. Also, he was very much caring for education and upgrading, professional level of his colleagues and his staff, and he arranged the workshops. So definitely his personal influence was very strong. But this transition and transfer of style coincided in time with establishment of new institute when they were moving from glass and steel architecture to new forms. And I think that if we search further, we may find some decrees and orders, relevant to this stylistic transition. But I think that was mainly this program of change was shaped by his personal, influence. Thank you.